Hi everyone and welcome to this week's video. My name is Angel DeSantis. Thank you for being here. I wanted to talk this week a little bit about thought patterns and how thought patterns don't go away once you leave the religious environment that you're in. And I want to talk about the experience of life and how to experience life and the difference that I have noticed in myself from being raised in a cult in something that was very religiously oppressive and the way my brain experienced life to how it is now with the brain structure that I've built and how I experience life. So, and again, this is stuff that's true for me, and I am offering it out in the hopes that perhaps it's true for you and there's some commonality there. But we'll see. So, I'm looking at my computer. So, my premise for this whole argument is that religious trauma is that of suppression, and it also suppresses thought. It makes your brain develop in a way that it only allows one or two avenues of thought. So when you go into a situation, they will tell you that this situation is bad or good and you have to accept it, or what ends up happening, and this is what ended up happening for me, is I would enter a situation and I would try and prejudge it because that's how my brain was set up. And I was just trying to keep myself safe. I would think, well, is it good or bad that I'm talking to this person? Like, if this person is nice to me and open to the religion that I'm selling, then this is a good experience. But all of a sudden, if this person is gay, then all of a sudden, oh my God, like now it's a bad experience. I need to get out because I can't be associated with this because, God is going to punish me or I'm going to be punished or something like that. And it's that sort of frantic, very chaotic thinking that does a very big switch from being like, this is great to being like, this is trash in an instant with something somebody says or something somebody does. And that there's no in between, there's no middle ground. It's either it's a good thing or it's a horrible thing. And the consequences of it being a horrible thing is usually very horrible. So for me, I would be, trying to witness to this person. We would go beg on the street all the time. Grew up in a cult called the Children of God. And I would be out there begging on the street and trying to get this person to give me money and a soul. And it would be going well. And then after about, if I spent like more than 3 minutes trying to convince this person to give me money and his soul or her soul, then it would immediately switch and an adult would come in and be like, you're wasting time, you're being bad, and this is now a bad experience and you're a bad thing. And so I would always try and figure out at what point situations go from being good to bad, or I would enter any situation or I would be watching a movie. And we had a whole rating system, which is a whole other thing. But if I ever watched a movie that wasn't rated and I didn't know if it was good or bad, then I would watch it. And the whole time I'm watching the movie, I'm not actually watching the movie. What I'm watching for is this going to turn into a bad thing? Because if at any point it turns into something bad and then somebody catches me watching something bad, then I am put at risk. I'm put in harm's way. So I'm always trying to get into a situation and immediately find out, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Is it something that is pleasurable or is it going to cause me harm? And what ends up happening is you end up having not an experience of life, but you just end up having a judgment of life. So when you're going to like a restaurant, for example, and somebody says, I remember getting this, somebody asked me like, Angel, where should we go for like really good Japanese food? And I just got this like it was like an elephant sitting on my chest because I was like, I need to say the right thing because either I'm going to do a good recommendation and it'll be a good place and they'll be happy, or it will be a horrible place and they're going to hate me and they're going to talk behind my back and I'm going to be shunned from the group and everyone will know that I'm trash. And so then I would get locked up and be like, I don't know. And they'd be like, well, you grew up in Japan. Don't you know Japanese food? And then it was, again, that black or white thing. Like, if I say yes, then I'm good, but then I need to offer a recommendation. And if I say no, I don't know Japanese food, even though I grew up in Japan, then I'm bad and I'm trash. And then they're going to shun me from the group. And again, what's happening is that I'm not there. I'm not experiencing the situation. I'm not in the moment with these people who are like, hey, do you have any recommendations? Where I'm at in my head is in that moment of black or white thinking and trying to figure out, am I good? Is this a good thing? Or am I in harm's way? And then all of life becomes this thing that you're not actually present for, but instead you're stuck in your head in this cycle of trying to figure out whether something is good or bad, and you're just trying to keep yourself safe. So that is the place that I found myself in a lot. And what I ended up realizing is that I was not present for so many things in my life. People would talk about presence and just being in the moment, and it made no sense to me. I'm like, what do you mean being in the moment? Like, that's dangerous. That's not a good thing. And if you've experienced physical abuse too, I experienced a lot of physical abuse, and I would be walking down the hall, and then somebody would just like backhand me and say, well, you were smiling, so you were being foolish. So I learned to not even like be present for walking down the hallway. I learned that if somebody approached me, is this a good person or a bad person, or how can I have a good experience crossing this person in the hallway instead of having a bad experience? And then the thing that's bad becomes being present. So it's almost like an exact opposite of what real life is about, where real life is about being in the moment and experiencing presence. But in order to experience that, you have to feel safe. And for a lot of us growing up in religious environments, we did not feel safe. And so we ended up with this black and white mindset and this black and white way of thinking, which is going into a situation and trying to prejudge it so you don't have to be present for it, or you feel safe being present for it because everyone has prejudged it as good. So you can have this experience because people have decided it's good. Um, and what that does to your brain is it doesn't allow things to be in flux. And it doesn't allow you to take in new information and decide um, on an area of gray that is in between black and white, because most of life is not black and white. Life is black and white when you take an experience and you pull it apart to its very end. And when you stretch it to its absolute max, then there is a black and a white. But most of life is in the center. All of enjoyable life, we'll say, is in the center, and either ends of the spectrum is equally incorrect. So, how do we find a way to be at center, and how do we find a way to get ourselves out of this black and white thinking? And for me, what I have come up with, what I am currently speculating and have small evidence for, is that the world is constantly in flux. We are always changing. We are ever changing human beings. The nature of nature is that it changes. So you are constantly changing. The people around you are constantly changing. Your circumstances are constantly changing. But the thing about it is it's a slow change. And if you heard me say that people change and you immediately went, no, they don't, that's great. That's a good thing to know that your brain operates like that, because things do change and people do change. And not acknowledging something that's true doesn't make that thing not true. It just means that you're not taking it into consideration. And you should always take things that are true into consideration. And it is true that life is constantly in flux, and people and nature is constantly changing around us. So, the way that I experience life now is with that understanding that things change all the time. And so what I try to do is take in the new information without prejudging it. So if I have, 13 years of good experiences of someone, and then slowly but surely, and this has been true for me, and I've shared this with you guys as well, over the last year, there have been a couple of people who, after I have started this channel, have started to out themselves as being ugly or being upset. And I've started to have negative experiences with them. And previously in my life, when I was still in the cult or in this religious mindset or this very dogmatic mindset, I would have thought I'm not allowed to have a negative experience with someone that I know is good. And now the way my brain goes is I believe this person is good, but it seems like they are changing. And I think that is the more realistic mindset to have, because you can have evidence and then at some point you can have new evidence. And when that new evidence comes in, it's healthy to take that new evidence into consideration and consider that you might be having a different experience now than the one that you are used to or the one that you used to have. And that's what life does. Life is in flow, life changes, and that's also why it's really beautiful to experience things in the moment and be present, because life changes. So, to wrap up, let me look at my notes. To wrap up, I encourage you to take your mindset from a place of prejudging or black and white thinking, of trying to enter a situation and prejudge it, to invite yourself into presence, to invite yourself into the situation and to observe what's happening. And you can, the way that I did this is I talked myself through. So I would be in a room and be like, oh, the windows are great. Someone is sitting next to the window wearing a purple hat. And somebody would ask me a question. I would respond, and then I would turn back to observing. And what that did is kept me from the anxiety of thinking, was my response correct? Was it a good one or a bad one? I would respond and then turn back and be like, oh, the light is coming in really pretty. There's somebody with a stroller going by. And at first, it's neuroses because I'm literally trying to get myself out of a trauma brain. But eventually, it brings you into presence. And the ability to observe the place that you are in allows you to just exist a little bit more peacefully without having that heavy pressure of doing a good thought or a bad thought or a good thing or a bad thing. Because again, all of life is right here, it's in the center. And the good thing or the bad thing or the black or the white only exists when you pull an experience apart and hold it at either end and hold either end of the same extreme. Um, so I encourage you to start observing and to get really curious, because as human beings, our brains work best when we are naturally curious, when you're speculating about stuff, when you're creating stuff, and understanding that this is just it's a natural state for your brain to be in, to be curious and to be observing and be coming up with a bunch of fun ideas of what could or could not be. Your brain wants to learn, your brain wants to thrive, your brain wants to be present. And I believe that you do too. So if any of this has resonated with you, and you realize that you might be in a black or white thinking, or you might be in this place where you prejudge situations and people, know that that's very normal, especially if you come from a place where you had to prejudge a situation in order to keep yourself safe. But now I would like to call you into presence and curiosity and the observation of what's around you and the observation of what your brain can come up with about the observation of the situation. And I understand that might be a lot. And maybe it starts with you just being in a room, writing down everything that you see, and that's enough. And then the next time you walk into the room, when you do a sweep, you'll notice those things without having to write them down. And I think it just gives you a little bit more texture to the human experience. It allows you to show up and just experience the things that are happening and fully be there for them. Like your brain and your body are in the same situation together, observing the same thing, instead of your body being there and your mind being hyper aware and trying to find out if you're safe in a situation or not. So start with safety, start with what feels good to you, but also allow yourself to come from that black and white thinking into a place of presence, into a place of observing what's going on around you and just getting really curious about it. And remember, you are allowed to change your mind when you are presented with new information. And the world is your oyster. Or if you're a vegan, the world is your cauliflower. That's the best I can come up with. But I hope that you guys are healing. I hope that this is useful. If you have anything that you want to share, again, drop it below. I read the comments. I respond when I can. But congratulations to you for doing the work, and thank you guys for being here.